Hey guys, it's Simon here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're doing another ThunderCats review. Today we're looking at Cheetara number 5. This is the finale of the series, and is it valuable to read this? Yeah, it's fun. It's a good story. It's interesting. It's a very kind of like motherhood adjacent type story where we see this female character who has this very interesting connection with a young child, and she is dealing with that alongside all of her real life, adult worries. And on top, she has this magical realism element where she has visions of the future. And so she has to prepare herself and those around her for this coming difficulty, right? And so on its own, the story is pretty interesting. The art style is really wonderful. It's by Sully with art by Domenico Carbone. But, is it important for you to read this to understand the main story of the ThunderCats? No, not really. But it does add context. It helps you understand where the ThunderCats come from, why they ended up on Third Earth, and it builds up to a certain point before it kind of goes on, right? And it almost skips the ending of this, and then the first episode of ThunderCats, and then the series, right? It almost feels like that, where we see the lead up and the build up to the ThunderCats escaping from Thundera and the fall of Thundera, but we don't actually get to see that completely, and then we get to see the start of the series, right? So I find myself really enjoying this. I liked it a lot. I thought it was good. Would I have, looking back on it, would I pay $5 for each of these issues? Probably not. I think it'd probably be better to pay $2 or $3 per issue, or collect it and buy it collected. That's probably the best way to do this, but I really wanted to make sure that the ThunderCats brand gets the support and love that it needs so that it can continue to go. And so I don't necessarily dislike the fact that I spent so much money on it. I would have preferred not to have to do that, looking back on it, but it's not really that big of a deal here, overall, right? So yeah, anyway, so this is by Sully and Domenico Carbone, like I said, although Carbone did have a secondary artist with him this time. I can't remember her name. I think her name was Safino or something like that. And you can tell when they switch off, but it's not so noticeable that it's bad. It's just the characters look a little bit different, right? And I think that means that they worked on this at the same time instead of one after the other. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the lack of consistency across the character design is a bit annoying because I didn't know who was who for a few moments, right? I was trying to understand who it was. Not that big of a deal, but it is noticeable, right? So yeah, this story focuses on Cheetara as she's uncertain but close to a destination. Then they arrive there, and it's Cheetara and Yaga, and she sees this ever-changing sword. She has this vision of this sword, and she doesn't really know what it is, but Yaga tells her that it's the sword of Plundar. He had grabbed it eons ago, which I guess means Yaga is this eternal being, and I did not know that. So that's cool. And he tells her that he grabbed it eons ago and he threw it into the volcano to avoid having it fall into the wrong hands, because he thinks that it is a very dangerous weapon, right? It's maybe the mutant version of the Sword of Omens or something like that. And so he threw it into the volcano, and yet through Cheetara's visions and through the understanding of the world around them, they realize that maybe destruction and death will come to Thundera anyways, and so throwing it into the volcano might have not made too much of a difference. And he explains that the end is coming anyways, and Thundera will fall, but they're ready and able to develop, necessary things to make this less difficult, right? So they go talk to the king. I can't remember his name. I think it's Claudius, right? And he talks about the fact that he doubted Cheetara and that he's upset about that. And Cheetara tries to lessen his guilt. She's like, I doubted myself. It's okay. I can't expect you to believe in me if I don't believe in myself, which true if you're a family or something like that, or individuals, but he's the king and she's an advisor. Even if he doesn't believe her, he has to look into what she says because it might actually be important, right? I don't know. It feels like the justification's not great, but it works for the characters, especially since Cheetara is a young woman at this point, right? And they give each other mutual forgiveness for this, and then they start to develop their plan to escape. They develop ships to take the populace away, and as they're doing this, it seems like things are looking up, right? we join Cheetara as she goes to this like convent or whatever, and she goes and talks to this nun, and she talks about the Wiley kids, how they have not really been able to find themselves because the school's taking too long to build, and with all the stuff going on, maybe it's better for them to go with the ThunderCats. And so they get adopted by the ThunderCats, they become ThunderCats, and they join Lion-O, and now they are all together as siblings or brothers in arms in some way, right? And so they join Lion-O as like the kids of his age, right? So I guess they would eventually become Lion-O's right-hand men or right and left-hand man and woman, but because of the way that Lion-O ends up being an adult, that doesn't really happen, right? But it is what it is. So we move on from here. We get to see the kids playing. Tiger and Cheetara are happy with the preparations and how things are going. And it seems like in this case, they're really developing their relationship a lot, which is different from their relationship as adults that we see in the ThunderCats main series. So I'm guessing that at some point something happens to make it awkward for them, but they always have this like will they, won't they kind of relationship that kind of feels normal for these ThunderCats, right? And then we move on again, kind of flowing through the story. We see that a teenage Lion-O, much older than he really is at the beginning of the series, beats Yaga in a spar, finally, for the first time in his life. And this echoes the spar that he had with Cheetara, I think it was in like issue 6 or maybe 5, where he finally beats her and he thinks that she let him, and she laughs at him and she's like, no, dude. And this is the same kind of concept that happens here. This is kind of a echo of the same situation, right? And Cheetara shows up, she takes Lion-O with her to the temple, they see the Sword of Omens, and this is when I got a little bit confused because for a moment, the thought bubbles change from Cheetara's to Lion-O's, and we see this because they're a different color of orange, but it's not really explained properly. Like there isn't a focus, the focus is on Lion-O, and you hear these, and it seems like Lion-O is talking, but it could also just as easily be Cheetara, and so I feel like it was a bit confusing. I had to go back and check and like see the different colored bubbles, right? And so I was like, okay, this one's orange colored and the other ones are normally yellow colored, so obviously this is Lion-O. But especially because it talks about the Sword of Omens, but I felt that was a bit unclear. There could have been a better way to maybe label this, maybe like in parentheses from Lion-O's thoughts, right? Or something like that, because otherwise it doesn't make sense for these thoughts to be here. This is Cheetara's story, so how would she know Lion-O's thoughts in the future that he's looking back into this memory from, right? It feels like there could have been something else, right? Like maybe a note saying that Cheetara heard this from Lion-O's mouth, 10 years from now or something. I don't know. It just felt a bit odd for me, but whatever. And so we talk about the fall of Thundera. We see that it does fall, and the story ends with the ThunderCats on top of their ThunderCat mount or whatever on Third Earth, and it says that they're stronger together and that they will continue to do so and be so like this, right? And overall, this is pretty good. I actually really enjoyed myself reading this. I enjoyed the artwork. I enjoyed the storytelling. I just feel like maybe it's a bit frivolous in some ways, and also a bit expensive for what it is. So those are my thoughts there. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I will go back and review this completely later in the year, just not right now, and do like a full, okay, the whole story, this is what it is, this is what I think about it. But right now, I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, those are my thoughts on Cheetara number 5. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.